This episode was co-produced by Innosuisse, the Swiss innovation agency. Innosuisse supports SMEs, startups, research institutions, and other Swiss organizations in their research and development activities. They offer a range of programs to help you bring your innovative ideas to life. To explore their support offerings and find the right offer for your needs, visit their online guide and take the next step in your innovation journey.
If it's a VC, as you just said, right, it gives not you the same amount of sleepless nights if you see their money at risk. Exactly. But if it's your team, you know that if you ride a journey in the wrong direction, the individual investments of your team is screwed. That's a different story. Besides your actually individual investment, it's really the investments of the team, which all believe in the same vision.
Welcome to the Swisspreneur Show, a podcast about startup stories and learnings from experienced entrepreneurs. If you enjoy listening to our show, make sure to follow the podcast and leave a rating. And now, here's your host, Sylvain.
Cyrill, a very welcome to the Swisspreneur Show. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you as a guest today.
Thank you for the invitation, Sylvain. Really happy to be here.
You are the co-founder and CEO at QUMEA, a company that offers digital mobility monitoring for patient safety. Before we talk about your company, you actually finished your master's in engineering, and then you spent the better part of a decade working for other people before then starting your own business in 2019. So I wonder, what sort of motivated you to jump into entrepreneurship in the first place?
So I think it's the only thing which I really can do. and honestly, it felt somehow natural. So when I think about my characteristics, I'm a very eager person and curious, interested. So I also like to have fast decisions and to do things as possibly by my own. So it's really also like my mindset is entrepreneurial, and has been since ever, I would say, because already at the age of around 12, I, let's say, started my first business. Back then in the 90s, it was very magical to build websites and web applications. And that's how I actually found my way into having a first company. Also, of course, a small one. And since then, actually, it was part of my life and also of my thinking, I guess.
So it runs in your DNA, so to speak.
Yeah, maybe.
Why do you then still decide to first work for other people instead of directly starting your own company?
Yeah, good question. I think also that is somehow, it's just like it took its course. So when you start, at least when I was at school, it was not a natural thing to just go into entrepreneurship. So it was like, okay, some of very few only managed to do that after having a career and so on. So it's not like obvious to just have the patience and take the step into entrepreneurship at first. So I thought, okay, let's have a job. And maybe I would say I had gained very, very profound experiences in those, let's say, standard jobs. But when I look back, the pattern was always, all of those jobs have been very entrepreneurial. So especially, maybe we'll come back to that, especially my chapter at Innosuisse was already very, very entrepreneurial.
Fair enough, but maybe that was also a bit of pressure from the outside, from society, or maybe also parents or something that said, hey, you first need to have a proper job instead of starting your own thing. Was that something that you felt back in the days?
Honestly, I never thought really about that, but it makes sense. I think everybody back then, was somehow like forced or expected at least to just do a proper career. So education, school, university, just be on the safe side, right? Yeah. So for me personally, it was not like, taking the wrong direction. It felt just like natural. But I found out that I love to do things by my own and be quick and fast and creative. So it was just a matter of time, I'd say. Yeah. Maybe these days it's different. I think these days you also have educational programs for entrepreneurship at schools already. So also the feeling is a bit different when you start in the school, I guess. Yeah, but that's a good question.
Luckily, because you also have more role models who pursued that path and serve as an inspiration as well.
That's true.
I remember when I stopped after my bachelor's degree, my parents always wanted me to do a master's degree, but I started the first company right after that. And at the beginning, they did not like that at all.
Oh, really?
Afterwards, they became more supportive, but the very early days, they were like, you should go back to university. You didn't finish your studies yet. All of that, not in a bad way, but it was clearly not like what one would do back then.
I see. I understand. I think when I think about my son these days, I would be super proud if he goes into an entrepreneurial career quite early on, I think. But yeah, that's how the time evolves, I'd say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the founding story of QUMEA. You started the company in 2019. You were a total of 3 co-founders. So where did you meet your 2 other co-founders?
We met at our former employer, which was a company called Innosuisse. Also, I would say a very successful story in the Bernese region. I had the luck to join very early on, so really in the core team beside the founders. And David, my second co-founder, he joined a bit later. And then Ido, the third co-founder, also came in quite early. And yeah, we met and we got to know each other, learn each other. And we also learned how to, let's say, work with each other and find out that we share important characteristics and mindsets when it comes to working successfully together.
And I guess that's a very, very important part, that you know each other, ideally in a work setting, before starting a company together.
I agree. I mean, you can have luck. So if you meet your co-founder late, it could be just luck. But that way, it's a bit more insurance, I would say.
Exactly.
So I know. Yeah, when we started, we all knew who we are. I think it was just a quicker start that way.
And you not only grew your company, but also your team since the early days. Today, you have a management team of 11 people. That's quite a big number compared to the 3 co-founders back in the days. How did the non-co-founders actually join the journey?
So different stories. I think one worth to mention is Jonas, my CTO. He also joined quite early. And the fun thing here is that he was co-founded another company, which was specialized in radar technology. So he and his company, they built specialized radar hardware. And we met him because we thought about, contracting their company to actually build our hardware. And that's where we met. And Jonas was so fascinated by what we are doing and by our team that he decided to join us.
That's amazing.
So his company still exists. So he also had a co-founder, and it's very, very good and successful company. But he decided to join that journey, which we are about to start. So we switched sides from the actual contractor. We talked to QUMEA, and the others they joined on the journey. So different stories from the management team today. You're correct. It's quite big. We also, in the meantime, have people from, let's say, big industry corporations aboard, which also joined with different stories. So one also sat on the other side of the table when we negotiated about some contracts. And that's just the way it goes. And I think it's also a bit of luck and coincidence meeting those people along the way.
Well, you have to be open that then something great emerges out of that.
That's
absolutely
true. That's true.
This is really fascinating because it shows that your mission and where you want to take your company must be very motivating and inspiring for people to join. But despite that, you also need to have the right incentives in place. And that's one of the key topics many entrepreneurs struggle, especially when they bring in a first-time management team. How do you incentivize your management team to make sure that your incentives are aligned with the success of the company?
So I think first, the point you mentioned regarding maybe the purpose of the journey of the company is very, very important. I think that's first. And then when you sit down and understand how people would like to get involved and especially incentivated, we found out that it's super important to really let them own a share of the company, because that's also from my personal experience. I also had the luck and the chance with Innosuisse to, have a bit of the shares, and that completely changed my identification to the company. And I think it's just honest if I say I would likely not have stayed for 8 years with Innosuisse if I would not have had shares. So that made a big difference just in the thinking and the mindset. And we, since the beginning, we said we need to take that serious as well and offer to everyone who fits in the company and who has the interest in buying a stake or actually get incentivized by ESOP or PSOP.
I love that you want to have people as co-owners. I think that's very, very powerful. And you just mentioned there are different ways to make that happen. One is to buy yourself into the company. So you really put money on the table that you can eventually also lose if things don't work out the way that you plan to. And then there's the whole PSOP, ESOP, where you basically get something maybe for a bit of a lower salary or just as an incentive mechanism. Which one did you use for your management team? Because I feel they sound almost like the same in theory, but I feel mentally, psychologically, if you put your own money on the table, you have a very different skin in the game than getting something for free, so to speak.
I fully agree. And the good thing here is that the whole management team, actually, they all put money on the table. So
Amazing.
all of them really, they bought shares and they have really their skin in the game. And the ESOP is more for, let's say, key employees or just everyone who has the interest but not the ability to put money on the table but still own a part of the company. But I fully agree. So it's the hardest commitment you can do if you really put on money on the table.
And then it really hurts if things don't work out as planned.
Yeah.
So you do everything you can to make it work. And if it still doesn't work, it's okay.
Yes.
It is what it is, but you for sure do everything you can.
And also for us, it's, I say, the best evidence you get when you have let's say you're about to hire somebody and he or she asks if there is the option to, buy a share.
Exactly.
And I think that's fascinating. If that comes on the table, that's really cool.
There are two more things that I would like to address there or to learn from you. How did you go about the valuation? Did you just use a funding valuation as sort of a rough rule of thumb on, okay, this is what new employees, new management members also have to put down, or how do you arrive at the valuation?
Yeah, I think it differs when you go back in time. So early on, of course, there was not more than almost a nominal value. We actually financed our first 18 months just by our own. And that also led us to the, let's say, natural thinking that we do not want to push that valuation to any point which we cannot actually, explain or whatever. So it was just, nominal valuation and maybe a bit of a leverage if you came a bit later. And then we had our first external round in April 2021. And since then, we just used that valuation. So that post-money valuation was like the reference for everyone who wanted to join. We also put a bit of the shares beside when closing the round just to incentivize new employees. And now in February this year, we closed our Series A, and now it's the same. It's the post-money valuation.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And the second part of the question I want to ask is, sometimes people don't have had the luck of having an exit before or having a lot of money. So did you ever have the situation where they were part of the management team and they needed to put money down, really skin in the game to prove it, but they just didn't have enough liquidity to pay for a significant chunk?
Yes, of course.
How did you solve that? Because that's another big challenge, right?
Also, then I think you always have option. I mean, you can work with ESOP, which works very well. It's up to you to define how much ESOP you want to grant someone, right? Yeah. And between the seed round and the Series A, we also had a convertible note running that was filled on and on, and we granted a quite nice discount on that. So also for those which did not have that much money, it was like an incentive to put it on the table now and get that discount anyway. So I think you always have options, but I agree, not everyone can and maybe wants to put real money on the table. But if you really see the willingness to have skin in the game, you find ways, I would say. Absolutely. And you should find ways, because this is the best motivation you can have.
Yeah, fully agree. I think it's so fascinating to hear how you executed that to hopefully motivate or inspire more entrepreneurs to do it in a similar way. Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about your product and your solution. You offer an AI-powered 3D radar that monitors movement and helps prevent falls and other incidents. Before we dive into the details, what came to you first, the problem or the solution?
It's not super binary in our case. Honestly, we three founders, we have been super fascinated about the technology, because at Xovis, we employed computer vision to solve different kind of problems. And as my last function was head of products at Xovis, I was also aware of, let's say, competing technologies. And the one which then came up was radar, based on the evolution in self-driving cars especially. So everything got smaller and cheaper, more powerful on the radar front. And I was super fascinated about that technology. We also thought about applying it in Xovis applications, but it wasn't a fit. So that was first. So the fascination for that technology was first. However, in parallel, I had a lot of discussions with different friends and different stakeholders for different type of problems in the market. And there was like a coincidence that we translated a match between that specific technology to the problem we are solving. On that way, we took ourselves the liberty to really play around also with the technology to understand the edges of the technology. One idea which was quite big at the beginning was also to apply it for avalanche rescue.
Oh, wow.
So completely different field.
Yeah.
And for different reasons, especially COVID, that was quite fast, quite quickly, let aside. And for the same reason, I would say COVID especially also helped to gain awareness of the big problems we have in nursing. Mm-hmm. And I had a very, very good and important discussion with a close friend of mine, which is a leading physician at the hospital in Basel back then, which actually led to the translation of that two things. So the problem they had and the technology we knew about. So we really had quite a fast approach in translating that and ending up in a first prototype or a first pilot. Yeah.
Wow, I love that.
So it's not super binary, but anyway.
Fair enough. Yeah. That's, I guess, how the entrepreneurial journey works. You know, it's not like black or white. It's usually a mix of multiple things together. So you were aware of the problem. You were in love with the technology. How do you then validate that this is actually a good fit and this is the right market and right focus for you to focus on?
That was primarily the customer which helped us here, because we have been very open about the technology. We have been then fascinated about the problem also. Mm-hmm. And it showed quickly that this is a huge problem. So really huge. And then the customer really stick to data privacy. So what they identified beside all the clinical aspects is that the product needs to fulfill data privacy regulations as good as possible. Yeah. So we had maybe the challenge, but also the luck to have the cantonal data protection lawyer on board in the project since the very first day. And with him and with the team on the hospital, we really identified that applying radar is the smartest way, because other than vision-based technologies, which could be also a fit, radar has very complex data signals which do not contain personal data at all. Right. And the other technologies which could also solve the problem, they have the problem that they first collect personal data. They can maybe anonymize that, so that's fair enough, but still it's a bit more a risk of in a data security manner. And plus, it was also on the clinical side, there have been heavy arguments to have a very, very discrete solution, not, let's say, a camera facing the patient, because the patients we encounter first have been so-called delirant patients. So they suffered from a delirium. And in that state, you're confused and maybe suffer from paranoia. And if you end up, let's say, waking up and seeing a camera staring at you, you maybe would end up in the paranoia again. So it's like different pieces of the puzzle which identified that this technology is really, really beautiful to actually tackle the different needs clinically, but also data privacy-wise. And that's how we ended up using it.
And continuing talking about your technology, it can not only measure and identify large movements like me moving around in the room, but also very small movements like breathing. How is that possible? That's like a very broad range of movements you can measure with the same technology.
Yeah. So the nature of radar allows that. I think the specialty what we do and combine is that we can do both at the same time. So usually when you go with radar, you need to decide for a wavelength which could be high or low. If you have a low wavelength, you can also, let's say, sense through walls like a Wi-Fi, for example. Wow. Yeah. And with high frequency, which is, for example, applied in the self-driving cars, you cannot penetrate certain materials, but you can have a very, very super tiny resolution. We try to find like compromise between both. So we choose a wavelength which is in between of both. And then that's part of our IP, we are able to have different so-called profiles active on the device, switching in milliseconds to sense large and small movements at the same time, because the radar works differently if it needs to sense fine motions versus large motion. We can combine that almost in real time, and that's also part of what we do really good, I would say.
It sounds super fascinating. Then there's another piece. You also use AI to really understand these movements. Yeah. What role does AI play? How do you embed it in your product and your solution?
Yeah, I mentioned the complexity of radar signals. And if I would show you raw data from radar, you and me, we don't see anything. So it's really super complex. That's the beauty regarding data privacy. Right. On the other hand, it's complex to apply traditional algorithms. especially, let's say, geometrical algorithms. And AI has the beautiful ability to see patterns where we maybe don't. And so radar, that's our idea. Radar is really perfectly fitted to be supported by AI, because we have a really big data set of different events and incidents on radar data, and we train our model so that AI really helps to see patterns in radar data which we cannot.
Well, that's amazing. And one thing now, sort of the billion-dollar question is, I get it. With the radar, you understand if someone falls, for example, based on the movement data. But now the real billion-dollar question is, how can you actually help people to prevent from falling? How is that even possible with your technology, if at all?
I mean, we are focusing on a quite specific environment. That's the acute environment. So the QUMEA product is applied on hospital wards. And the reason why patients fall in hospital wards is because they leave their bed, their chair, their wheelchair unattended. So you have quite a lot of patients with a risk of falling, especially if you come out of surgery or if you're just have an elderly patient. And the point where they fall is because they just leave their bed unattended. And so what we do, we understand or try to understand early signs of patients trying to leave their bed or trying to leave their chair, their wheelchair, whatever. And the nurse can choose a different level of sensitivity to get a very early signal or a late signal, and then intervene in exactly the time which is needed, accompany the patient and prevent the fall. So that's let's say the simplicity of fall prevention acute wards. Yeah.
It makes a ton of sense and also seems incredibly powerful in the field, in practice.
It is, yeah, it is. It showed up. I mean, we recently celebrated our 100th hospital using QUMEA, and the sum of all evaluations comes to a 74% in fall reduction. So it's really significant.
Wow. Yeah. Now, your technology seems to be so versatile. It can do a lot of stuff. What else is it possible of doing or capable of doing?
I mean, the technology itself can do ton of applications. So it's really, it's just unlimited. We, of course, we have like the mission of getting most out of patient safety as possible. So we chase a path of a patient safety platform. So we tackle additional applications on the ward to help the nurses and help the hospital to intervene early on. So what we did after fall prevention was so-called pressure ulcer prevention, which is also a very big topic in nursing failures. Pressure ulcer is when you as a patient do not mobilize enough or not get mobilized enough, and you can end up having quite severe ulcers. And we understand that reduced mobility can alert so that somebody can assist you to mobilize. Currently, we're doing quite some research in the topic of delir, what I mentioned before, so delirium, which is a very severe incidence, also a growing incidence. We see that the motion data we collect can highlight or can maybe be used to understand the evolution of delirium, but also maybe the therapeutics effect of delirium. It goes further. We have studies going on regarding so-called distress, so patients which feel uncomfortable, be it from pain or from anxiety. So really a big scope, sleep, epilepsy, apnea. So it's just endless. And our challenge is to really pick out the ideal pieces of the puzzle, not just to end up, let's say, with a mess of applications, but with a streamlined value proposition at the end of the day.
Yeah, the possibilities are almost endless, and you have to make sure that you choose the right things. That actually leads me to one of the key topics that I want to talk to you about, and that's also where you have a lot of different options to choose from. It's support programs here in Switzerland for startups. How did you, in the early days, but also now, decide where you want to engage, in what program it's worth to participate or try to participate, and where you said, no, there's maybe a waste of time. We better continue building and improving our product and doing sales, because that's ultimately what you have to do as a founder.
Absolutely.
Maybe also fundraising, but that's it,
Absolutely.
So how did you make the choices about what support programs are worth your time and effort and whatnot?
That's a really good question, because it's not so easy to answer. Because you have also in Switzerland, you have a ton of possibilities which you can choose from, some accelerators, events, awards, whatever, also the supportive programs. So it's really about, picking the right ones. And for us, it identified that those programs which give you low threshold help, especially regarding resources, manpower, also, of course, money, we tackle those. So we want to prioritize those which really give an impact directly on the product, on the development back then, especially when we just have been building the product, and less of let's come into our accelerator. We give you free access to 12 months, whatever. Even though there are good programs actually, but back then it really was about, we see the problem. We have more and more customers helping us to actually build the product. We just need manpower. We need money. We need manpower. And that was top of our mind when we chose those programs.
And one of the programs that you chose was Innosuisse. You are currently under the Impulse program, Swiss Innovation Power, and you have been awarded or granted 1.2 million Swiss francs for a project. How does that exactly work? Like, I want to dive into a bit more the specifics of the program. First of all, was also the reason to apply for that program due to the manpower, woman power, and the funds that came with the project?
Short answer, yes. The project you mentioned was actually already our second Innosuisse-backed project. And with the first one, we already gained good experiences. So really, it was a good project for all parties, I would say, also for the research parties. So we decided to go for another grant. And also back then, COVID was quite all around. Innosuisse decided to have even reduced threshold for applications and for the self-contribution, because with Innosuisse, you always have to also give a certain amount of contribution by yourself. And it was just cheap. It was ideal and was cheap, and we applied, and it worked out very, very well.
Talking about application, what was the application process like? Because that on its own can already take quite a lot of resources and time from you as a company or as a startup.
Yes, it can. With that big project, we've been several parties. So we had 2 research parties and 2 or 3, remember, the industrial parties and us. And everyone helped to actually fill that application. So that speeded things up. But still, it's a bit of work, of course, it is. It went smooth. I would say it was comparable to the first application we did. And it ended up with a yes. So I would say it's not like the big hurdle to take, but it's a bit of effort, of course. But if you have your parties on deck and everybody is involved, I think it's manageable. Yeah.
And I also think it's good that there is a hurdle, right? Because otherwise everyone would do it, even cases where it wouldn't make sense at all.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's too early, but just how is the project going? Like, where do you stand with the second Innosuisse project at the moment?
With the second, actually, it almost ended. So we already see quite some results. And the fascinating thing about that project is you have your big goal formulated in the application and agreed on between the parties. But at least for that project, we got quite some valuable results on the journey. So we have improved individual algorithms based on the findings in that project. We even got a person working for us in the meantime, which actually came in through that project from the university. And then we had the chance to bring him on board with QUMEA. So it's the sum also of the pieces on the road, which in this case helped us. Of course, the results at the end will also be valuable, absolutely. But it's just also having the possibilities to work with skilled individuals on the university side and on the industrial side, which also gives you quite some valuable results on the way.
Amazing. And I'm sure you did the return on investment calculation for the first project with Innosuisse that you did. There you got 400,000 Swiss francs awarded. What was sort of the return on investment for you during that very first project, if there's anything that stood out?
I did never check that in detail, to be honest, but it's definitely a return on investment, because that first project led to 2 very important things. First is the briefing rate recognition was also part of the sub-results from that project. It was not the main goal, but it evolved out of that project.
Nice.
And the second is the pressure ulcer prevention, which I just mentioned. So this was actually the goal of that project, to prevent the pressure ulcer preventing function. And we did that. We managed to apply for a medical product with that. So it was really a return on invest, absolutely.
It really shaped your company that sense.
Yeah.
So you already did it again. So you applied for a second time. You're almost at the end of that project. So my question is, would you even go for a third time if you ever could?
Yes, we already did.
We already did. Oh, amazing.
We're in application process. No, I think
I'm not
Innosuisse is one of the supportive programs in Switzerland, which is really really, really supportive. So I recommend you to prove that. It doesn't fit for all. I think the most important thing with an Innosuisse project is who is on board. So which partner do you pick from the industry, but also from the universities? That's all about. So if you choose the wrong partners, the project will not be successful.
As with almost anything, basically. Yeah. There's a second big topic I want to talk to you about, and it's customer acquisition. That's something that many startups struggle with or also see just a lot of challenges. And you mentioned you sell to hospitals and care institutions. With your complex technology, that probably also comes at the higher price point. So I assume it's a clear B2B sales focus for you.
It is a pure B2B sales focus. However, it's not the argumentation line of just having a high price point ending up with B2B. Fair. It just makes sense because the problems we address, they create big pains for our customers, which are business customers. So it's the hospitals. So falls, of course, it's very, very sad for the patients. But a fall, if you look at it economical wise, it's very expensive. And it creates quite some stress on the ward. Mm-hmm. Expensive in the sense of you have follow-up costs, of course, but you also usually have longer length of stay. So if you have a patient falling in admission, you end up having him a week, 2 weeks longer on the ward. And that's a very crucial aspect with all patient safety topics actually in the hospital, because all of them usually lead to prolonged length of stays. That's the point, yeah.
So I just wonder, how does your sales process look like then? I assume it's probably a pretty long sales process, but what are the different steps there?
It is, I would say, as most of the B2B processes, it's long. It's especially long because we sell to hospitals. Because hospitals, they have a different sense of working. So it's most of them, at least here in Switzerland, are publicly owned. So it's a mixture between engaged individuals, but publicly forced structures. You have your budget cycles. And then, of course, you deal with different stakeholders in the hospital. So the nurses are one, the physicians are others. You have the CEO, the CFO. So it's really a multi-stakeholder game. The budget cycles are tough. And especially in these days in Switzerland, especially, you have quite some pressure on the economics of the hospitals. And that does not help as well
I imagine.
To actually shorten the sales cycle. Yeah.
These different stakeholders you just mentioned, they all come together in your sales process. Where do you usually start? Because I imagine you probably need a champion internally to, push forward and say, yes, we need something like QUMEA. We want to introduce that. But then you have different authorities. Someone is responsible for the budget. Someone else might have the ultimate sign-off power. You have to engage with all of them. That makes it very complex. How do you bring them together in a streamlined sales process?
Yeah, that's correct. And we start usually with the user, which is the nurse. Yeah. So as you said, it's super important to have a champion. And the champion is most of the times it's in nursing, because they use a product primarily. They also helped us so long to actually shape the product. So we usually, that's our entry gate. So somebody from the nursing management, or maybe a ward manager or a quality manager on the nursing side. That's like our standard entry gate. And then quite quickly you have other stakeholders on the table. In our case, it's quite important to also show the return on invest, and we can show that quite strongly. As I mentioned, with the 74% reduction in falls, that's also a directly cost-saving contribution. So financials are crucial as well. You could also have the chance and the luck to have the CEO being a champion of QUMEA. We also have CEOs, which really forming our fan base. But the standard first touch is always nursing.
Got it. Yeah. And you mentioned the industry that you are selling to. They are actually struggling at the moment. Some are even closing shop. Others have faced heavy cost reductions. How does that impact you in your sales and growth efforts?
Yeah, that's two-sided. So one side is that hospitals really struggle. So we have a first hospital in Switzerland, which is in Chapter 11, which is Wetzikon, which sent out a shockwave throughout the whole country. We have the majority of the hospitals showing red numbers, decreasing EBIT margins. So it's tough. And I think we have a fundamental discussion currently going on in politics, how we should tackle with that situation. That economical pressure usually complicates your first touch, because just you have other things top of your mind as a hospital manager as talking to, a startup or scale up. However, as we have the luck that we already have quite some big reference base, and the fact that we can show a true return on invest, they still listen to us. So we could be part of the problem solving, and we are part of the problem solving. Of course, not the whole solution, but we are part of the solving, and that's why we still succeed. But I feel that it takes even more time. So I think that's like the effect out of that current acute crisis. I would say that sometimes you just need to be a bit more patient. But at the end of the day, it's also a chance for us, especially abroad in Germany, for example. We see exactly the same effect, which generates quite a push for QUMEA, because customers are so in desperate need of assisting supportive technologies or whatever they can get to support their daily operations. They are forced to listen and to understand how we can help them.
So if I understand that correctly, it might delay the sales cycles a bit more at the beginning, but ultimately can actually be potentially a boost for your business because there's an even higher pressure to leverage technology.
That's true. And what we observe is that once we are in a hospital and they have evidence and they are used to use it, it's quite normal that they come up with a second ward server and so on. So when they see the value by themselves, it's quite more easy, which is also natural because you're confronted with tons of problems, and now you choose one specific solution for mobility monitoring, and you just hope that it works, right?
Of course.
Still, even if you have quite some evidence, even though most of the hospitals still want to test it by their own, this is also characteristics for that environment. So I really understand that because it's an investment and you want to pick your battle also within the hospital quite wisely. So a managing director will always try to understand, is it worth to pilot that? Because even piloting is an effort, right? Yeah. It ends up in delaying first-time customers. The problem itself is speeding up the upselling.
That makes you just wonder, this proving the value to a potential customer or a lead, how do you do that? You mentioned paid pilots. That's probably one way to do it, but even that probably comes with quite some time and potential money investment. Yeah. Is that usually the way that you go about it? You probably first show them some case studies, you let them talk to existing customers, but then at one point they need to invest some money to actually do a paid pilot with you.
Yes. So actually 95% of the customers still do a pilot. Even though we have, as I said, 100 references out there. It's just in the nature of how hospitals buy stuff. They try it out, right? They evaluate, they maybe even think that we have a completely different operations than the hospital left and the hospital right of myself. That's okay, maybe it's even true. So that's something we just have to learn and to deal with it. It's just part of the game. And of course, in order to be able to get a first meeting at all, you need to have some evidence and some proof. Yeah, that's quite challenging when you start up with your first customers, right? When you really come out of the, let's say, development phase and need to have first friendly customers, where they want to see evidence, it's tough. So we had really the luck to have a very, very supportive first customer who just co-built that product with us, and based on that first success, we could also leverage their network, and that was like how we built the first 20 customers. So just based out of that network. And in these days we have our standard process, which is based on evidence, on clinical evidence and evaluation evidence, and then of course reference visits. So it's always best if you as a hospital can see how other hospitals apply that technology and get convinced by other customers.
Absolutely. But if I understand that correctly, you basically had the sort of a co-development in the early days, also with a very strong champion. And then as you grew, it more shifted to reference visits, paid pilots, as you were able to go from startup to scale up yourself, basically.
That's absolutely true. That champion was crucial. We're super lucky that we had that chance. Also these days, we still, we evolve the product even further. And also now it's super crucial to have your customers on board to co-build that product. So we invest quite heavily in being close to the customer, understand their pains and their pressing needs, rather than just offer them what we think could fit. Yeah.
This leads me to the last core topic that I want to address with you, scaling up. You are a scale up today, and going international is probably one of the first things that you do to then say, okay, we nailed this in Switzerland, but there are not only hospitals and care institutions in Switzerland alone, but also in Germany, where you are active and mentioned, but also in Sweden, where you're also active. How do you go about going international? Was it just copy paste, or were there actually a bit bigger differences to the Swiss market than you might have thought in the beginning?
There are big obstacles because healthcare is different in every country, even in some regions of an individual country. So in Switzerland, actually things go completely different in the French-speaking part and in the German-speaking part. So there are heavy obstacles, actually. Of course, you find early innovators which take what is there and which also celebrate that. And that was the way we actually entered those markets you just mentioned. Behind that, we try to understand where we see a potential fit of the current value proposition. So it's always easy to not have to adjust much and go on with what you have. The region we identify to be matching are the DACH and the Nordics, because the DACH is, I would say, comparable to Switzerland. It's not the same, but it's comparable. They have same challenging when it comes to the nursing shortage. They have some sort of cultural proximity, but it's just, it's not that big. So it's not like that big step you need to take. And then the Nordics, they're very different because they have almost 100% publicly owned healthcare system. So it's the country actually observing the insurances, the hospitals, the patients. So everything is under one roof. And that is very valuable when it comes to prevention, because in such a system, you can really value prevention because you see the direct impact. Yeah. And that's also why those countries are further when it comes to first understanding, for example, falls or pressure ulcer problems, and second, being open to tackle them. So we already see tenders there for the systems we offer, which is still in Germany and Switzerland is still just to come. Right? They're just, there are more ones. But still there, every country, even in the Nordics, when you go to Sweden, to Denmark, to Norway, to Finland, to Iceland, it's a different country. Every country is new. Yeah, references in other countries usually don't work. They could if they have really a renommee. So university hospitals, for example, they usually work. It's not like a SaaS business which you can B2C grow over like whole the world at once. You need to be there. You need to understand the local market. Also, one reason why we decided to have local teams on the ground.
Makes a ton of sense. And you always have the physical component compared to a SaaS that you just mentioned. Yeah. So I also wonder, how do you scale the business model? Do you always have sort of an installation or setup component and then a recurring sort of license for the software part as well? Or how do you price your solution?
That's correct, yeah. So the hardware, the sensor is usually charged one-off. Mm-hmm. There's also a bit of service we apply to get the customer onboarded, which is charged one-off. Then you have a recurring fee based on the amounts of bed and the functionality you apply.
Got it. Mm. And to go internationally, you not only need to grow in terms of customers, but also your own team. We heard Innosuisse was one way to recruit and hire employees. How do you actually find the local teams and also the other employees that you hired along the way? Because that's probably one of the most difficult things to do. Find and hire the right people for your company to scale.
It's pure network. Only network and a lot of luck.
Did you also work with any recruiters or anyone to fill these positions?
No.
All so through your personal network?
Yeah, personal network or network of the people we have on board, of course, yeah. And for example, our guy in Sweden, this was really coincidence because back when we closed our seed round, he got in touch with us, already being active in Sweden, and was fascinated about the product, and that was just coincidence. It's just luck for us, and it managed to be a super valuable player in our team today.
Amazing. And another thing that often happens is you grow the company, but then also the roles and the responsibilities change. And some people from the early days might not be the right fit anymore for the new scale up, for the bigger company. So how do you make sure that you also retain the talent that you found through hard work and the network?
Yeah, I think first regarding the roles which change, it's super important to remain humble. Understand that you just build an organism and not just like a unit for me or for my co-founders. It's an organism which you have the ultimate goal that it lives without you, right? Yeah. So that organism needs to evolve over time. First it's small, then it grows. And to actually retain the talents you have on board, I think we already talked about incentivizing them. So I think it's important that they really have a strong identification to the company and to the problem we are actually solving. And of course, the openness to also evolve their roles. So I would say our management team, we talked about it in the beginning. it's constantly changing. So not who is part of it, but the roles within the management team are constantly changing. Also who is part of it or not, but also the other roles in the company, they're really constantly evolving and changing. So if I build an organization today, it will be outdated in a half year.
I love what you said at the beginning, that the organism, the company should live without you as a founder. I love that because I see it exactly the same way. And yet sometimes it's hard to let go as a founder and to say, no, I'm so important. I need to be the face of the company. I need to control everything. I think it's not true. You should ideally have nothing to do with it and it just works. Then you did an amazing job. How did your role as a founder change over the years now as you also built QUMEA to a scale-up company?
Yeah, it changed dramatically. I mean, the first days I coded myself. So first algorithms were designed by myself, and then that was like for 4 weeks, and then that was it, right? And since then it evolves on a weekly basis at least. And yes, for me personally, I really believe that it's my ultimate goal to get obsolete.
No,
really, I love to see that thing we started to create growing in a sustainable way. I have no bad feelings when someday I'm out of that or have a completely different role within that. I just want to see it growing in a sustainable way. I always say also to my management, help me to shape my role because I'm super open. If you think I'm best in doing coffee, let's talk about that.
Of course.
Maybe somebody is better in running the company. Yeah, I think that's, for me personally, that's my ultimate goal. Of course, I understand that there are people out there really sticking into the idea of co-branding myself with the company. That's not my issue. I want to see arguments that I'm not the right person in the right seat. Mm-hmm. When those arguments are convincing, I'm the first one who is actually either stepping back or changing the role or whatever. And same should be with all the people in the company, actually.
So it seems that you really follow this no ego cultural value in your company. I think that's a crucial part of it, to be able to see it the way you just described it.
Yes, it is. It is. And I think if we end up someday having these egos in the company, we need to react quickly. That's important because that's just not the culture we have. Yeah.
And it could eat you from within the company if you let that grow, basically.
Absolutely.
The last part of scaling up I want to talk about is obviously fundraising, because once you want to go faster and aim higher, you also usually need some funds to finance that in the early days. Where did you find your investor? Also through the network, the personal network, or how did it happen?
Yeah, mostly through the network, yeah. I mean, we had the chance that we have been with Innosuisse for quite a while. So especially me, I also had quite some good relations to the early investors of Innosuisse. That helped. So one of those is heavily invested again in QUMEA. And then it's network, yeah. And of course, it's also the luck that me, myself, have been able to get that money out of Innosuisse and invest again in QUMEA. Yeah, same with other people joining. We have employees who joined on the way, who put in really, really big stakes, which also had their exits prior joining QUMEA. And of course, we have institutional investors in the meantime, but also those evolve through the network. So it's not like we never did. I'm not sure if that is a fault or not, honestly, but we never did like a broad reach out. So up to now, we never did that, the classical, I send my deck to 100 VCs and look what's coming back. We never did that. Mm-hmm. We talk to VCs, we talk to institutional investors, we talk to everyone who actually approaches us, of course, or where we actually think these individuals or this fund could really help us. So we really try to filter. So far, that worked very well. So I'm really, really happy with my investors. They understand our market, they understand our challenges, and they have patience. But it's not easy. So it's not obvious. I think matching investors with your company and vision is at least same important as matching your actual employees with your vision and your company.
Definitely. And it's at the same time, it's also a luxurious situation to be in that you just described, right? Not having the need to send out your pitch deck to 100 VCs to potentially find the right one, but they sort of also contact you. So I wonder, what sort of traction did you need to have to be interesting for them or to be attractive for them?
Not sure. Actually, not sure. Because I have no comparison. So also Innosuisse was built without having a single VC on board and with a very successful exit. So I'm not really, I don't have like a lot of evidence when I should compare what we did compared to, let's say, the standard way. I think it's what we heard also from the investors we talked to is it's very valuable to be just transparent from the very early on. So don't polish your story too much. Really be transparent, be humble and honest, show what you have, what you can, and what you're about to do. And then it's also easier if you have like an initial interest, you really chase the way together with potential investors, because it's a trustful relationship. If you are in that super pitchy game and always talk about sunshine and neglect that there is also rainy days, that could be, I think, a potential risk.
I just have a little train of thought that occurs to me right now with your discussion. I need to ask for one information, not sure if you can disclose it, but how much of the share percentage did you give away to external investors, roughly? Like, because you bootstrapped for quite a long time.
Yes. So today it's close to 30%. Yeah.
Which is comparably low at your stage, right? If you compare to other companies that have the size and the employees and the revenue that you have today.
That's correct. But as I mentioned before, we also have individual employees with quite some stakes. Also, employees joined later, so not founders or early founders or late co-founders. So depends a bit on what filter you apply. So if you count them to investors, it's more than the 30, or
of course.
Yeah. But the typical external investors, which are not involved in an operational way, is around 30%.
So that is sort of the claim. I'm not sure, I cannot prove it, but just coming out of this discussion with you, it seems that the more stakes you keep within your operational team, the better job you will do. So I feel that if you would get a big VC on board, there you always have this syndrome of, it's not my money, it's not my stake, or my stake is too small, so I just do whatever. And it feels that really this co-ownership ultimately leads to better results.
Yes, and especially who is co-owning the company. So if it's a VC, as you just said, right, it gives not you the same amount of sleepless nights if you see their money at risk.
Exactly.
But if it's your fucking team, sorry to say it like that,
course. Yeah.
You know that if you ride the journey in the wrong direction, the individual investments of your team is screwed. That's a different story.
Yeah.
Besides your actually individual investment, it's really the investments of the team, which all believe in the same vision.
And there's probably friendship and families behind these investments, right? That, if shit hits the fan, are way more people affected that you still need to be able to look into their eyes.
Absolutely. And maybe those relationships did not exist initially, but maybe turned out to be a friendship on the way. Yeah. And so, to look at the numbers, we have 70% of the company would be very personal effect to me if I screwed up, actually. And that's different if you have like 80% of the company in the hands of a professional investor. So it's another relation, I could say.
Now, there's also the other side, right? I see this motivates you. This gives you also even more purpose to do a good job and to give your everything. At the same time, it's also a very high stake. You know that if this doesn't work out, you have a big problem with a lot of people in your network. How do you keep your sanity and don't go completely crazy with all that pressure on you?
First, I try to be super clear and transparent when it comes to investing in the company. So everyone who wants to invest in the company gets a private session with me where I try to maybe not force them, but maybe at least clearly show them that this is super high risk.
No, yeah. You can lose everything.
That
has
everything.
To be clear.
Yeah. Even if that is quite unlikely, honestly, because we have quite a stable turnover. We have a continuous growth. So bankruptcy should be not an option, right? But you never know if your journey as you imagine it ends up very, very, very good, or if there's a different story on the way. So I'm super transparent to everyone who invests, especially of course the private persons, what they're about to do. And so it's their money at risk, and I want to be super clear and transparent about what that means.
That makes sense, but you still have a lot of pressure to then make it happen, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we are all super convinced that we will make it happen. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. And we're super bullish about the case, about the problem, about the market, about the team, about everything. So we believe in that, and every single investor does as well. So it's not like, let's say, it's a natural game for me to actually convince you that this could be really the next big thing, of course. But still, I'm humble enough to explain to you that there is a very high risk in putting money on the table.
So it sounds like a very healthy perspective on things and a very positive outcome of even more motivation and really making the right things happen.
Yeah.
I love that. Now, you've been successfully running QUMEA for the past 5 years, and I just wonder, what is next for you? Like, what are the next milestones or also next changes coming up?
I mean, we have further expansion plans. So we wanna push the local teams in Germany and Sweden and the Nordics to run even more. And of course, beside of that, we will evolve the product. So there's quite a big research pipeline currently running for giving even more value to the customers on that patient safety journey. I mentioned some examples before. So those research projects are running and will result in additional functionality, additional value of the product. Most of them will also be medical graded functionalities. And then it's really about scaling internationally, scaling with the teams. And we also see that the market is evolving. So when we started, I would say we entered a new market. So we have been one of the first player in the world tackling the problem we do with that type of solution. And today we see competition doing it different. Yeah, really different. But we see that we obviously identified a market where there is something going on, and we are still leading. We are the biggest one, and I would say we still have super strong USPs, but it helps us as well because the market gets an understanding of what's going on, and the discussions we had with customers 3 years ago compared to these days is different. Then we had to some sort of educate them, and now it's more than just telling them what we do, how we can help them. So it's really, it's different. I think that will go on because the pressure on nursing shortage will increase even more. I also see that we have a lot of potential be outside of the regions I mentioned. We, of course, have already pilots in other countries running. We always tend to understand the market with the first project. So that's always a good way to see how the system works, how maybe your local partners could be built up. So we have different countries currently running pilots, helping us to identify the next region we want to close.
Amazing. You will be busy for sure, but that's also very promising what you just described, hopefully shortening the sales cycle a bit, that you can skip the educational part in the sales process.
Yeah, I think that's we will see that. I'm quite convinced. We already see it sometimes. I mean, the best case we had is a 6-week sales cycle, like half a year ago. So it was like super exceptional, but the average is still much higher. But I expect a trend there as well, actually. Yeah.
And the increasing competition that you mentioned, that often also leads to M&A activities. Is an exit something that you also think about?
Yeah, I mean, we are not naive in that way. So we see an exit as a super strong option for us, of course. I think that's also a goal. Yeah. It would be wrong if I say we want to build like I would be the patron in 20 years or whatever. So we want to just build, as I said, a sustainable, great business. And if that business could be even more sustainable by an M&A, that's fair enough, right? Yep. So I think we are open to that. And we, of course, also have discussions in that direction. Personally, I think we want to prove by ourselves currently that this journey is not over. It's just accelerating at that point in time.
Amazing. Sounds super exciting. Now, to wrap up the conversation today, Cyrill, we also prepared some rapid fire questions for you. I give you a short question. You have to answer in maximum 1 sentence. You ready? Let's see. What's the best part for you of being an entrepreneur?
I'd say it's the pace and the scope of learning.
I love that.
You're just forced to do it.
And what's the worst part?
You sometimes feel quite alone.
I imagine. Yeah. What's the greatest entrepreneurial lesson that you've learned so far?
That you need to agree with constant change. You need to adapt with that. Otherwise, you will fail.
It's part of the game.
Yeah.
If someone offered you 10 million Swiss francs to quit QUMEA today, would you?
Did ever anyone answer yes to that question?
We never asked that to anyone.
Really?
No.
It's a clear no, of course.
I'm glad. And how do you relax and unwind after a busy day?
Not so easy because there's family at home.
The work continues.
So unwind is not so easy, but it helps to switch context. And I think that's part of the relaxation. So if you are forced actually by whatever your kids, and so to actually really switch your context, that's also very valuable. But also in my spare time, I have some receipts, but it's more than a sentence, so I need to stop.
That's fair. Cyrill, that was a lot of fun. I learned plenty in our discussion, just gained new perspectives. Thank you for that. And I wish you the best of luck and all success for the future. We're really excited to continue to follow your journey.
Thank you very much, Silvan. It was a pleasure.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, you can support us by rating our show on Apple Podcasts. This way, we can reach an ever-growing number of aspiring entrepreneurs.